Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Tizenhausen. Today is the 23rd of August. A lot of important news. Firstly, Putin was going to hit the bank with a hazelnut. Who talked him out of it? Trump has decided to pull his trick of changing threats again. Well, Aliyev is openly preparing Azerbaijan for war. Dugin has reported that Putin is ready to fight for another 10 to 15 years. And Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela, has announced mobilization and is preparing for war with the US. And Zelensky has rejected Putin's demands for security guarantees for Russia. All this and more will be covered in today's episode, which promises to be very interesting. So if this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So Putin was offered to strike the Ukrainian president's office with a drone, but he refused, saying, absolutely not. This was stated by Lukashenko. Well, in general, coming from the author of the bestseller I Drove a Tractor at 270 kilometers per hour, and that's not a joke, he really did say that. Lukashenko drove a tractor at 270 kilometers per hour, and from the author of the bestsellers, I'll show you where the attack was being prepared from, as well as the phrase about how the Russians, when leaving Belarus after the exercises, suddenly decided to take a shortcut through Ukraine, through Kyiv, purely by accident. In short, from the author of all these bestsellers, we once again hear that Putin was offered, but he said, under no circumstances. Basically, it's long been clear to everyone that Lukashenko plays the role of Putin's interpreter of sorts, as well as an expert on the Kremlin's court secrets, which he occasionally lets slip, seemingly by accident. Naturally, he leaks these secrets in coordination with the Kremlin, because Putin himself simply can't do it for certain reasons. Pardon my French, but that's just because he's a coward, plain and simple. Of course, Lukashenko lies all the time. And as for Putin, if he really wanted to, he would have taken over Ukraine, but he actually feels sorry for them. In fact, as Trump said, the tanks got stuck in the swamp, otherwise, of course, he would have taken over. Well, we all remember that. By the way, the worse things are going for Putin, the more Lukashenko talks. And in general, when it comes to The Hague, I think it will be Lukashenko who betrays Putin the loudest and the most. For some reason, I am very, very sure of that. You know, like in the movies, there's always a weak link in the gang. I'll talk, I'll tell everything. It was him, it was all him. He made us do it. That will be Lukashenko, 200%. And Kolya, his son, let me remind you, is studying at Peking University. Everything has been thought through. That is, everything acquired through backbreaking labor has been moved to the Middle East, partly to China and to Africa. In general, Lukashenko is getting ready, fully aware that there is a likely scenario where, after the war, the 1.5 meter tall gatherer of lands, and not just lands but also beatings from Ukraine, will try to sweeten the bitter pill of defeat by at least somehow pleasing the deep state folks by annexing Belarus. Well, they've already practically signed all the paperwork over there. All in all, the situation for the mustachioed chip is very complicated. He brought this situation upon himself. He and Putin now look like some kind of space pirates, like those characters Mary, You, and Rat. It seems to me the resemblance is really, really close. And well, Trump has also delighted us recently. Delighted in quotation marks, of course. A reporter asked him, did you talk to Putin about the American factory in Ukraine that was attacked by Russia? And Trump said, yes, I told Putin that I was unhappy about it. What? Let me explain what this is about. Recently, an American electronics factory in Mukachevo in the Transcarpathia region was attacked by the Russians. They burned a lot of things there. And after that, Trump stated that he thinks in the next 2 weeks we'll find out how things will develop. And I'd better be very satisfied, Trump says, because I'm not happy that an American factory was attacked. Listen, this is just, what is even going on here? It's like a strange desire to be humiliated in front of the whole world. I don't get it. Full quote, I think that in 2 weeks, we'll find out which path I choose, says Trump, because I'll choose one of two and they'll find out which one. Thanks, Captain Obvious. This is just to the point about how no one would dare touch American property or American investors on the territory of Ukraine. Remember that claim? It was Donald Trump himself who said this some time ago. We'll go in there, build factories, we'll extract resources there. No one will dare touch anything. He was talking about regions that, well, are actually bordering the front lines, not about Mukachevo. As far as I remember, this is the first time something has landed in Zakarpattia Oblast. By the way, has Orban already commented on the fact that Hungarians in Zakarpattia Oblast could have been affected? No, he hasn't said anything. Why not, I wonder? Do you know why? Now let's talk about Trump, what Trump is dissatisfied with, and how all of this looks against the backdrop of other events. Recently, property belonging to the Azerbaijani company Sokar was attacked, also on Ukrainian territory. Aliyev responded immediately and quite harshly at that, even allowing for the possibility of lifting the arms embargo. He also announced the allocation of several $1 million for the restoration of the energy infrastructure there. And by the way, thank you to him for taking that stance. So it turns out that Aliyev has the political will and the toughness to put the Kremlin ghoul in his place. But Trump, it seems, can't manage to do that. Just compare the military power of the US and Azerbaijan. So how does that happen? And by the way, in light of the escalation and Putin's attacks on the property of the Azerbaijani state company Sokar on Ukrainian territory, Aliyev has essentially ordered Azerbaijan to prepare for war. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev stated that after signing the peace agreement with Armenia, the Azerbaijani authorities are monitoring sources of new threats and increasing military strength to ensure security. The statement was made against the backdrop of those very strikes and the escalating situation with Russia and specifically with Putin. Let me remind you, there was a whole series of events, including the downing of an Azerbaijani airliner. And then there was the absolutely inadequate response from the Russian Federation. By the way, no one responsible has been found to this day. That's the point, after all. Then there was the attack on members of the Azerbaijani diaspora who were tortured to death during interrogations. Aliyev's response, the arrest of propagandists who called themselves journalists in Azerbaijan, you know the whole situation. And now, once again, there are direct strikes against the property of the Azerbaijani state company. Quoting Aliyev, "We must be ready for war at any moment, because the way things are going in the world, it's impossible to predict what will happen tomorrow. The guarantee of our security is ourselves, our state, our people, and our armed forces. Therefore, anyone who decides to strike Azerbaijan will deeply regret it." He also noted that the army has already been strengthened on the Caspian Sea and the number of special forces has been increased in other directions. And in addition, and this is important, Azerbaijan is acquiring the most modern drones, new artillery systems, and is awaiting deliveries of new combat aircraft. As for the existing ones, they have been fully modernized. We do not advise anyone to consider hostile actions against us. We have strong enough allies, and our position in international organizations is always recognized as fair. As for the strong ally, we understand who is being referred to. It's Turkey. Naturally, Putin will not openly go to war with Azerbaijan, fully understanding that if he clashes with Erdogan, it won't end well for him. This was proven by the Russian fighter jet, which can be easily shot down if it flies where it shouldn't. Then come the tomato sanctions, but nobody cares about those anymore. Basically, the problem is that Trump, who gives 2 or 3 weeks, 50 days, some more time, guarantees something, doesn't guarantee something else. For example, there are talks about lifting sanctions on Russia. The point is, this isn't just about Putin, it's about all dictators in general. Right now, Putin is showing them that war is nothing to be afraid of. Well, for them, it's not scary. A dictator won't end up shooting himself in a bunker, though the night is still young, yes. People will still shake his hand. He might even end up with some extra territory. War is action. War is fun. War means new territories. This is what Putin is showing other dictators. This is what appeasement leads to. It has always led to this. Appeasement didn't work with Hitler, and it won't work with Putin either. And as a result, dictators who are surprised by such a mild punishment for war will want to try it themselves. The price? 100,000 of their own people. 1 million? No big deal. Women will give birth to many more. And of course, Ukraine's primary and most significant ally in this truly challenging case is our armed forces, our people, who have demonstrated extraordinary and unwavering will in the profound defense of their own freedom and independence. And friends, sometimes, actually always, our armed forces need our help. That's why I'm reminding you about our fundraiser. This fundraiser is for the 1st Medical Battalion. We're raising money for the 1st Medbat to get a mall. The mall is an unmanned vehicle for evacuating the wounded. It's a very, very necessary thing. Basically, it's a drone on airless wheels with an armored capsule. If one of our defenders is wounded, they are placed inside, secured, and the mole transports them across fields, forests, and roads to a safe location where medics receive them and continue saving their life. So medics don't have to drive out under shrapnel, under bullets, to pick them up. This device, the mole drone, solves that problem. That's why supporting this fundraiser is a direct investment in saving the lives of our defenders, our heroes, and in saving the lives of our medics, bright, brave, and strong people. So I ask you to support this for our 1st Medical Battalion. They really are all incredibly awesome. Well, let me show you a video of what this mall looks like.
Evacuation of the wounded. One of the most difficult challenges on the front today, together with Boris Tizenhausen's channel, the 1st Separate Medical Battalion is raising funds for ground-based unmanned systems for evacuating the wounded, called MAL. Your 100 hryvnias can save a life. Thank you all for your support.
Let's give our medics some truly awesome support. They are absolutely amazing. If you're not watching me on my own channel, which is possible, here's a QR code you can use to go directly to the fundraiser. There's private, there's mono, and there's PayPal for those who want to support from abroad. I always want to say a huge thank you to all of you, from myself, from our warriors, from our heroes, from our defenders, and from us. They deserve an absolutely enormous thank you. May everyone return home safe and sound to their families and loved ones. And so, Alexander Dugin has popped up again. He's Putin's court philosopher and made the following statement. By the way, his statements are very telling. You can really take the temperature of the whole situation by them in every sense of the word. So we will keep fighting until we cleanse Russian society of mold, declared Alexander Dugin. It might take 10 to 15 years, or maybe even longer. I know this, you could say, personally from Putin, Dugin tells us. Everyone who is against the special military operation will pay for it with blood. Internal purification is also a condition for victory. Well, the fact that Dugin has long since lost his mind over this whole imperial thing is a fact. But from time to time he voices things that Putin himself would never say out loud, like the idea that we'll keep fighting until we cleanse Russian society of mold. Well, that's basically what's happening right now. In other words, they've rounded up everyone across the country who's willing to kill for money. They've emptied the prisons. The problem is, on the Russian side, it's this rabble, this human trash that's dying. But on the Ukrainian side, unfortunately, it's the best sons and daughters of the country who are giving their lives. So this is what Russia's cleansing from mold looks like. If the Kremlin's boot, along with all its duplicates and its entire entourage, were to go to hell, that would be the real cleansing from mold. Dugin proclaims that everyone who is against the so-called special military operation will pay for it with blood. But how? What does he mean by that, do you think? Especially looking 10 or 15 years ahead. I have some ideas. I don't know, maybe you agree, maybe you don't. By the way, share your own theories in the comments. I think the return of the death penalty, and accordingly those who question the ideas of the great Puche, will be dealt with in that kind of way. I think they'll definitely have to bring back the death penalty. There have already been measurements and discussions about this in the information space. Without this, Putin won't be able to hold on to power. Well, I don't know if it will go as far as the NKVD troikas, who used extrajudicial methods to eliminate anti-Soviet, in this case anti-Putin elements. I don't know. In simple terms, back then they executed people without trial or investigation. Maybe. And here's an interesting confirmation, by the way. The Russian government is going to build new pre-trial detention centers for Russians, with 11,000 new spots planned, 14 new high-security buildings, and so on and so forth. They're expanding the infrastructure. And here's a question. Why do they need additional buildings if half the prisons have already been emptied out and destroyed in the war? It feels like these new, comfortable cells will be waiting for those who return from this war and can't find their place in peaceful life. But does peaceful life even exist in Russia? It's always war there, some kind of survival race. Just imagine, these antisocial elements from the prisons will come back with experience. So he was in prison for theft or some other crime, and he'll come back with experience in killing and even with weapons. There you have it. I think it's going to be just like a movie. I don't even know. Well, surely many have seen The Cold Summer of 1953. I think the profound consequences of that truly big amnesty will seem like absolutely nothing compared to what will inevitably be coming back to Russia from the ongoing war. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Dugin lost his mind because he didn't listen to calm analysis. But you should still give your mind a chance. Subscribe. Now, about the fact that Putin supposedly has another 2 or 3 weeks thanks to Donald Trump's generosity. Well, there's one interesting point here that tends to escape notice. If you connect what Trump is saying, in 2 weeks I'll make a decision or not, there will be 2 options, and I'll choose one of them. Well, basically, it's all as usual. If you connect this news with another piece of news, US Senator Lindsey Graham has threatened to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. It would seem that for Donald, it's completely normal to pile new promises on top of old ones without fulfilling the old ones. But the second piece of news is actually quite positive. Lindsey Graham, such a pro-Ukrainian, wants to label Russia a sponsor of terrorism, finally. So, what's the connection between them? What will happen if you combine these 2 pieces of news? Here's what will happen. Literally up until the meeting in Alaska, Donald Trump was saying, I will impose sanctions against Russia. 200%, I swear, he was vouching for it like a real guy and so on. Those who don't believe in these sanctions, Lindsey Graham echoed him, will really, really regret it. So it turns out they were working together as a team there, as a pair, and now they've forgotten about the sanctions. And now there's a new threat. Trump says, I'll give 2 weeks. Lindsey Graham, maybe Russia will be declared a sponsor of terrorism. What happened? There was a substitution of promises? Again? Instead of the old threat, a new one appeared, with new deadlines, and the old one has somehow already been forgotten. Where is Lindsey Graham's 10-day, 50-day ultimatum where he says, if you don't believe, I'll wipe you out, and so on? Where is all of that? There is a substitution of promises and threats going on. Moreover, the status of the threat is being downgraded. Pay attention to this. Next time, for example, they could simply announce the introduction of sanctions against key figures in Putin's inner circle, and then, for instance, actually impose sanctions on a couple of them. Everyone will start clapping their hands. There you go. And you said Trump wasn't doing anything? Well, here you have it. Some damn Zolotov or someone else, you see, who is already under sanctions anyway. Global sanctions against Russia, against energy resources, against those who buy them, are nowhere near the same as declaring Russia a state sponsor of terrorism or imposing some kind of personal sanctions. This is what we need to pay attention to. So if they keep lowering the status, lowering the threats, and giving Putin 2 weeks, well, we all know perfectly well where this will lead. By the way, friends, regarding Russia's encapsulation in the information space, the banning of messengers, the blocking of YouTube, Instagram, and all sorts of other Western resources, not just Western ones, by the way, if we're talking about TikTok. So you can actually profit from all this and punish those rare-toothed, spiteful, deep state types who are constantly shouting, kill Ukrainians, Zed, this is all ours, this isn't ours, and so on. They basically live like in a pigsty, but they want to take everything away from Ukraine. Why they want it, nobody knows. Go tidy up your own place first, your own house, I mean. Clean your own filthy stairwell. No, they insist on living like this, but we'll mess things up for them too. Just like a Soviet pensioner. Not all of them, of course, but there are some like that. They didn't live well themselves and won't let you live well either. So with the arrival of the Max Messenger, we now have new opportunities, friends. It turns out that now some Russians are renting out their accounts, not because life is good, but out of necessity. Well, you could also, for example, somehow get hold of a phone number, but that's extremely difficult. Now, this Max is being linked to all government services, to doctor visits, to everything. And after a while, it even takes photos of Russians. So basically, that's it. Life is just perfect now. So it was written that, in general, if you rent this messenger from someone, well, more precisely their account, then, in principle, you can write from abroad to those people in Russia you don't really like, just like we used to do on Facebook and other social networks, which will soon be completely blocked in Russia. So you write to Max, thanks for the info about the refinery. I passed it on where it needed to go, sent it over crypto, your information was highly valued where it was supposed to be, and so on and so forth. So, thanks for the info about the checkpoints. Basically, that's how it is, yeah. Well, with Max, it'll immediately go where it needs to. So, If on Facebook he might still block you, or you can write "Thanks for the donation" on Mall, here everything will go exactly where it needs to. That's why now we're going to work out how to rent as many of these accounts as possible. And believe me, people will be willing to rent them out. Putin has done everything possible to make Russians sell everything. I recently showed how a Russian mother was persuading her son to join the army. Go on, go, come on. But everyone needs money, and she wasn't even hiding it. It's complete madness. And one more piece of news that I think deserves attention. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has announced a mass mobilization due to the threat of strikes from the United States. Well, it's the same story here. There in Venezuela, that's where the term Maduro effect comes from. In Venezuela, Maduro, trying to hold on to power, just covered everything with the Vietnamese star. The economy, inflation, hyperinflation took off, and poverty everywhere. But he still managed to stay in power. It's a paradox, isn't it? He's under sanctions too, and organized his own kind of shadow fleet. Everyone pretends that he doesn't exist. But in general, Maduro announced that the country's militia, as they call it, numbers more than 4.5 million people. Earlier, the media reported that Trump instructed the Pentagon to prepare for strikes against drug cartels in Latin America. And 3 warships were sent to the shores of Venezuela. Honestly, it's a complete mystery to me, and I'm not just talking about Trump right now. Maduro didn't just show up there yesterday. How can you keep, right next door, a member of this dictatorial club who, by the way, illegally seized power and who, well, I don't know, could be used by Putin or someone else from that club, and there are plenty of them, against the United States, and used to the fullest extent? So the US tries to influence regimes in different corners of the world. Well, sure, but keeping Putin's sanctioned crazy buddy right next door is apparently totally fine. Same with Cuba, where Russian warships occasionally wander in, right? How is it possible that over such a long period, these issues right next door haven't been resolved? By the way, Cuba is also friendly with Putin. Take a look, just Google Cuba now after this episode if you're interested. It's just devastation. Everywhere the Soviet Union touched first and then Russia, it's devastation. Yeah, just look at Donbass. In fact, we have a very telling news story about it coming up. By the way, Maduro is quite a sly one. He even took money from Putin to build a Kalashnikov rifle factory. He took the money, there's no factory, and the money's gone too. Well, yeah, that's about right. And yes, when it comes to the Maduro effect, it's always worth remembering that a dictator would rather drag the whole country and its people into the abyss than give up power. That is, you can completely destroy the economy, people might end up eating worms, but they'll still worship the great Puche. There you have it. And by the way, I have no doubt about this, none at all. For some reason, I think that even an empty fridge won't kick Russians into going out into the streets. They'll take from each other, they'll snatch things from one another, they'll fight with rats over expired food by the dumpsters, but no one will rise up against Putin. That's how it is. I'm not talking about all Russians right now. I want you to understand, I make a distinction. There are those who help Ukraine, there are those who fight for Ukraine. That's why I make this distinction. And about another piece of news from Donbass that I mentioned. In Donbass, it so happened that a ZID correspondent, a war reporter, almost went blind because there's no water there. That is, the war correspondent for Komsomolskaya Pravda, Dmitry Steshin, said that he almost lost his eyesight after washing his face with water in occupied Donetsk. He had to heat a bucket of water in the sun every day just to take a shower. There were no other options. And in the end, some kind of parasite settled in the water. So he poured this water over himself and almost lost his sight. This situation is the very quintessence of what has happened and what will continue to happen, and of how Russia treats the occupied territories, how it treats Donbass. So in 2014, 11 years ago, they occupied Donbass. Now there's no water. They've turned Donbass, Donetsk, into some kind of dump, a cesspool. It's terrifying to look at. Somewhere over there, they only get water once every 5 days now. If you pour water on yourself, you'll go blind. I want to ask those who shouted, Putin is the president of peace. We're so happy, we're so glad. We have a referendum. Finally, we're with Russia. So, how is it there in Donbass now? Have you changed your mind yet? Well, there you go. That's why everywhere, as Putin says, wherever the foot of a Russian soldier steps, it will be like this, until that foot is removed from there, preferably separately. And you, friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel. Let's support the fundraiser for our medics, for the first medic. And for that, I will always be extremely grateful to you. Wishing us all a peaceful day. And of course, glory to Ukraine.